Now, Washington Mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. At AM 630. WMAL.
7:37 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. Brian and Brian with you, and also on the line, Shannon Bream, the Supreme Court correspondent for your Fox News channel, who was actually in the room yesterday as these very important Obamacare arguments began. Shannon, how are you?
Great, Brian. How are you this morning?
Doing very well. Hey, listen, yesterday was, as I understand it, sort of a warm-up and not the real meat of the argument, but what had to be decided before they could go forward is, did they have to wait until the law actually went into effect and somebody was impacted by it, or could they go ahead and consider this matter? And that all had to come down to whether or not it was a tax or a penalty. Explain all that.
Well, you remember the president said when he was selling the bill before it became a law, this is absolutely not a tax, it's not a tax increase. And in the wording, Congress did not entitle this a tax. This penalty you have to pay. If you decide when 2014 rolls around you don't want to kick in with the individual mandate, you're going to have to pay a penalty. And it is collected through the Internal Revenue Service, and it looks a lot like a tax, but it's not called a tax. The problem is there's this 1867 law that says you can't file a lawsuit over a tax until you've already paid it. So it could be a way to stop the case from moving forward, to wait until somebody has to pay that. It would kick the case until at least 2015. It's something that the justices had to consider on day one. But I got to tell you, being in there, most of them seem convinced it's not an issue. They're ready to move to the merits.
I mean, they'll often say that you can get some indication of where the justices are. I mean, there was not much consideration of the alternative viewpoint, right?
Right. I mean, we heard from 8 of the 9. Justice Thomas maintained his 6-year silence. But of the 8 who spoke, most of them seem to be saying, all right, we're with you with this. And a couple of the justices actually said, listen, I'm buying your argument about moving forward. I'm with you. Let's get to the next point.
All right, so that's what happens today. And what is the issue to be sort of discussed today?
Today it is all about the core of this entire law. It's all about the individual mandate. They've expanded from a 1-hour to a 2-hour argument. There'll actually be 3 different attorneys who argue today. But it's all about whether Congress has the power to do what it did under the Constitution.
Just on the tax thing, Samuel Alito said today that you're arguing the penalty is not a tax, and then tomorrow you'll be back arguing the penalty is a tax. So that comes from the government's perspective, right?
Yeah, it was very interesting because he was very pointed in making that statement to the Solicitor General, Donald Verrilli, of course, the government's top lawyer who was defending the health care law here. The government at some points in the lower courts a couple of years back did argue that this was a tax for the purpose of stopping the lawsuit under that arcane law that we just talked about. And now the government has come into agreement with the parties on the other side, the states suing them. Listen, this law doesn't stop us. Let's move forward. So he noted there's a shift, and he said, today your argument's not a tax, but tomorrow, meaning today, you're going to come back and talk about the mandate. You're going to talk about the fact that it's legitimate under Congress's taxing powers.
Right.
He got a little jab in there.
And he's right about that. Will they be arguing that it basically is a tax, which allows them to have this individual mandate because they use it as a tax?
Right. And there are several ways that they can go about defending the law. They're going to talk about the fact that Congress does have taxing power to do what it needs to carry out the other laws of the land. They're going to talk about the Commerce Clause. It's the one you've heard so much about. Mm-hmm. The fact that this is interstate commerce, the idea of health care, and that everybody's going to need health care at some point, and Congress does have the right to regulate it. They will also go to the Necessary and Proper Clause, which is the same thing. Also talks about the fact that Congress has the right to pass measures that allow them to enforce powers that they are granted.
All right, and the argument that will come from the states is that, hey, this is unprecedented to say that the government is going to mandate that you actually buy a product or buy a service.
Right, and they're going to make the argument that's never happened before. There's a lot of scattered Supreme Court precedent out there, but, first of all, it's not entirely clear, and second, the court can set its own precedent. It's the highest court in the land, and it can make its own remedies. And it most certainly will have to do that here because it's a case of first impression in a lot of ways. There's never been a case where they've gone forward and said Congress can force you to buy something, and the states will say compelling someone into commerce, making them buy something, is different than regulating commerce.
All right, so you're in the room, and I've been there. It's really quite impressive when you're in the chambers. But talk about who was there to listen in the audience and who was outside.
Well, plenty of protesters, as you would imagine, on both sides. They were very polite and well-controlled yesterday. I got to say, the Supreme Court's police force, like Washington, a lot of agencies in Washington and entities in Washington, they have their own police force. They were doing an excellent job. They had planned months in advance for this. It was very controlled, and people were generally nice. There was some singing, some shouting, some chanting. On the inside, it was really an interesting who's who. You'd look around and see senators like Senator Johnson, Senator Sessions, others in there, plenty of lawmakers. I believe Marsha Blackburn was in there, Tom Price, who is a congressman and a doctor out of Georgia, and many others. But I was really most interested to try to get a look at Attorney General Eric Holder and HHS Secretary Kathleen Sebelius. This is their law to defend and to uphold. It's the key crowning legislative achievement of the Obama administration, and they were there in one of the front rows. And as much as we craned and tried to peek and see their faces during the arguments, they're pretty stoic.
All right. Obviously, a lot of attention is on Anthony Kennedy, and I know the meat of the argument really occurs today. What didn't happen yesterday? But did he say anything? Did he give any body language? Did you read in anything that came out of Anthony Kennedy yesterday?
He seemed to be with the rest of the justices as far as indicating he's ready to move forward on this issue, that he doesn't think that this first day is a block. They didn't have any discussion, really, of the mandate yesterday. You heard the one comment from Justice Alito saying, this is what you're going to argue tomorrow. But that's as far as anybody got really previewing today. They all seemed very interested, very tuned in. It was a hot bench, meaning there were a lot of questions, a lot of discussion. And it was an extended argument yesterday as well, 90 minutes, and everybody was engaged the entire time. There were actually several minutes of very strong laughter with a couple of jokes from the bench. The justices are very funny, many of them, and it really broke things up, a lot of tension yesterday.
So we're talking about some kind of ruling on this matter in June.
Right.
Really in Supreme Court land. That's pretty quick.
I agree with you. I mean, I think most people are disappointed to realize it doesn't come right away, but the end of the term is June, and generally all the opinions for the term have to be in by then. They have complete prerogative here, though. They could extend into the summer. You'll remember with Citizens United maybe that they came back and actually re-argued the case in September. I mean, there are a lot of options that they have. It does seem like a lot to digest for them, such a massive case by June. They're completely capable, but if they felt like they needed more time or couldn't reach at least some kind of agreement they wanted to get to those opinions, it's completely within their purview to take this into the summer or beyond.
All right, Shannon Bream, we'll let you go because I know you got to scramble over to the High Court and get ready here in just a bit. But thank you very much for taking time out to be with us today.
Sure, Brian and Brian, have a great day.